Joe Rogan started a war on the internet when he challenged Dr. Peter Hotez to debate Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy on his podcast. Dr. Hotez is a scientist, pediatrician, and alleged global health expert who specializes in vaccinology. Dr. Hotez has appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast before, and he's been extremely critical of RFK Jr.
Now, I know that Robert Kennedy Jr. is, he's a big one. He's a big one. Yeah. And he seems like a very intelligent guy. How could he not be aware of the science behind this, and what is he getting wrong?
What he's getting wrong is just about everything. He's formed an organization called Children's Health Defense. It is probably one of the best organized anti-vaccine groups out there. Now, he's doing other things other than vaccines, but it's all nonsense.
Why is he doing this about vaccines?
I don't know. What's his motive? I mean, you have to ask him, what's his motivation?
Would he be a guy that you would want to have a debate with or have a discussion with?
I'm uncomfortable with the idea of a debate because it's like debating, I don't know, it's like debating a Holocaust denier, whether the Holocaust exists.
You've already lost the battle. Like, it's time to regroup. And maybe regrouping would be confronting someone with actual scientific information. I mean, you are a real doctor. Mm-hmm. You're a guy who actually studies this. And you're a man who understands the science. You're a legitimate academic. You could actually put a dent in this with a real conversation.
He's an attorney, and he's very clever, right? And he knows how to do arguments in court. And what am I? I'm a scientist.
Right, but do you think that he wants to deceive people, or do you think that maybe he's just incorrect in his accumulation of data?
His information is highly misleading.
That brings us to RFK Jr.'s recent appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast. Having already been called out as a fraud by Dr. Hotez, the Democrat presidential hopeful pushed back.
Have you had anyone debate you publicly about any of these?
Nobody will debate me. For 18 years, nobody will debate me. In fact, I've scheduled many, many debates, and I've asked Hotez many, many times to debate me. And I think you've asked him, here, why don't you debate Robert Kennedy? And he said, because he's a cunning lawyer or something like that. But I've debated Hotez on the telephone. His science is just made up. He cannot stand by it. He can't cite studies.
But the fact that no one will debate you speaks volumes, especially now. They can't say now that you're not popular.
After RFK Jr.'s appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, Dr. Hotez tweeted his disgust with Spotify for even allowing RFK Jr. and Joe Rogan to have a platform to discuss these topics. Spotify has stopped even sort of trying to stem Joe Rogan's vaccine misinformation. It's really true. It's just awful. And from all the online attacks I'm receiving after this absurd podcast, it's clear that many actually believe this nonsense. In response, Joe Rogan laid down the law and urged Dr. Hotez to put his money where his mouth is. Peter, if you claim what RFK Jr. is saying is misinformation, I am offering you $100,000 to the charity of your choice if you're willing to debate him on my show with no time limit. RFK Jr. chimed in, voicing his support of the debate. Let's have the respectful, congenial, informative debate that the American people deserve. But Dr. Hotez didn't want to have the discussion publicly. You have my cell, my email. I'm always willing to speak with you. Still, Joe Rogan pushed back. This is a non-answer. I challenged you publicly because you publicly quote-tweeted and agreed with that dog shit Vice article. If you're really serious about what you stand for, you now have a massive opportunity for a debate that will reach the largest audience a discussion like this has ever had. If you think someone else is better qualified, suggest that person. Dr. Hotez replied, if you are serious about addressing vaccines and the fact that 200,000 unvaccinated Americans needlessly perished during our awful Delta BA1 COVID waves, including 40,000 in our state of Texas, because they fell victims to vaccine disinformation, I want to have that discussion. Again, Joe Rogan pushed him to publicly debate on the topic. I'm going to ask you very clearly, are you willing to debate Robert Kennedy Jr. on my podcast? There's still no word from Dr. Hotez agreeing to sit down for a debate with RFK Jr., even though several individuals have come forward to put even more money down for Dr. Hotez's charity of choice, if only he would agree to the debate. Other pundits have been urging Dr. Hotez to stay as far away from a debate with RFK Jr. as possible. No medical professional should ever agree to do this. Never. It elevates the conspiracy guy, demeans the medical professional, and will only convince the kooks out there that RFK is right because a real doctor took the time to debate him. Even Elon Musk chimed in on the viral exchange. He's afraid of a public debate because he knows he's wrong. Maybe Peter Hotez just hates charity. Any scientist who refuses to be questioned is anything but. The exchange on Twitter later started to bleed into real life when Dr. Hotez was confronted at his home by an activist who urged him to debate RFK Jr.
Oh, are you Peter Hotez?
I am. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
How are you?
Hey. So why are you not going to debate RFK on Joe Rogan's podcast?
Oh, come on. That's harassing.
I'm just curious.
What?
Nothing hostile, just curious.
I haven't said anything one way or the other.
I mean, are you planning on doing it?
He just invited me, so we'll see.
And I think you should, though.
Well, we'll give it some thought.
Okay.
Okay.
And what do you have to say to people who think they're vaccine injured? Anything for them?
Don't come to me.
I mean, do you have anything to say to people that think? Do you have anything to say to people? Yeah. I mean, do you think vaccine injuries are real, Peter? Peter, it's just a question. Settle the science now. On a safari to go vaccinate more kids?
Once more, Dr. Peter Hotez took to Twitter to complain about being stalked. Ugh, I was just stalked in front of my home by a couple of anti-vaxxers taunting me to debate RFK Jr. Of course I was looking my Sunday best in our brutal heat wave. What is it with people? Dr. Hotez eventually put a pin on the entire discussion when he was invited on MSNBC to explain why he refuses to debate RFK Jr. Take a listen for yourself and decide if the reasons he gives are good ones.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are certain things you debate. I understand what a debate about 18th century Enlightenment philosophy is and debating Rousseau and Bishop Berkeley. I understand what political debates are. But in science, we don't typically do debates. What we do is we write scientific papers. We present our findings in front of a critical audience of our peers to solicit their input and suggestions. But one doesn't typically debate science, maybe the one-off discussion of evolution versus creationism and that sort of thing, but that's not what we do in science. And so that's problem number one. And problem number two is the debate with RFK Jr. I've discussed this issue with him many times by phone and by email, and the problem is, he just keeps on moving the goalposts. Turns out it's very unproductive, and it's also pretty exhausting as well.